acting seems like a strange profession. The ability to inhabit different characters, to become somebody different, is kind of strange for someone like me that has such a strong personality. But then when I thought about it, I realized, we all have some actor in us, and being in the street is being a form of an actor. You have to perform in different ways in different places so as to keep different things from happening. And an actor is also falls into the archetypal category of the trickster, which is one of the oldest and most widely dispersed across different cultures, mythological kind of archetype. The trickster is someone who appears at the boundaries between civilization and the wilderness. Trickster could be somebody who dresses up in costumes like a jester, or a shaman that dresses up like an animal and takes on spirits. Or in today's modern world, many people are disturbed by people that put on a different gender. So an actor is a form of that. And I'm going to circle back to that point at the end of our story. But now think about Boyz in the Hood. And the famous scene of so many rappers reference Run Ricky Run. At the end where the red Escort or the red Honda Civic, whatever it is, pulls up and the guy leans out with the shotgun and Cuba Gooding says, "Oh, Ricky, run." And the character of Ricky, played by Morris Chestnut, starts running, and the guy in the Red Bull's hat or the red hat, maybe just a red hat, he's supposed to be a blood, he leans out of the red car with the shotgun, boom, hits him in the back. Actor's name was Lloyd Avery II. And Lloyd Avery grew up in a place in LA of many boundaries. He grew up in a neighborhood called Vista View, which is in the middle of LA, but it's an unincorporated area that's patrolled by the county sheriff and is governed by the county. I mean, it's a totally built up area. It's right near that, well, it's not right near, but it's in the same neighborhood agglomeration as the Crenshaw, Slauson, Lemert Park, all that, which is now or for a long time has been the largest concentration of black population on the West Coast, though that's becoming less and less African American. But what's interesting when I say it's a boundary point of many different areas, it's LA, but it's not LA, literally. And also that area, part of it is where like the rolling 60s, rolling 40s, some of LA's more infamous and active gangs are at. And then part of it, like Vista View and Baldwin Hills and some other neighborhoods, are still one of America's wealthiest predominantly black neighborhoods. Lots of beautiful homes. Baldwin Hills, as they call it, the Black Beverly Hills. Vista View is not Baldwin Hills, but it's a nice area with nice homes. But gangs exist in all those places. The Jungle that you've heard of, that's in that same general vicinity. And those are the gangs that have problems with each other. So 1991, Lloyd Avery's about 18 or 19. He does Boyz in the Hood. And he's famous, even though he had a very small part. But he's famous for, kind of like Dark Side of the Force reasons. Like, he's only existed in the movie to kill one of the good kids. He's causes the main tragedy of the movie. And but some people, especially in LA, like it. And remember, this is, these are the first kind of like, well, there had been the blaxploitation and always like crime movies set in the black community, but like as far as like a LA hood gang movie, Boyz in the Hood was the first in Menace to Society. So this is new, seeing things representing LA gangs on the screen. And there were people in LA that would get his face tattooed, well, like from that scene where he's leaning over the car with the shotgun. And his brother, so they grew up in a nice family. Well, is, I don't know what went on in the family dynamic, but on the surface, they grew up in a the upper middle class neighborhood. The father had some type of good job. The mother might have been a teacher or something. But his brother had some issues. His brother, I think, got in the rolling 60s and had some legal problems and did a little prison time, but didn't turn his life around. But Lloyd, after the movie, he gets associated with being a blood gang member just from the movie. And he starts hanging out in that neighborhood, the Jungles, which is where the Black Pea Stones were at. And that's the neighborhood that was featured in Training Day, even though, as I talked about in one of my videos, the real events of Training Day were inspired by something that went on in the Rampart neighborhood. But in Training Day, they go in that neighborhood with all those apartments, and, you know, it's like a subdivision type of look, but like a ghetto subdivision with these winding streets and all these apartment buildings. That's the Jungle. And even now, there's, you know, Jungle has problems, but, you know, in the 80s and 90s, it was definitely very infamous. So after he does that movie, crime in LA, just like in New York and in America in general, in the mid-90s, starts to go down significantly. But he's floating around, and by the mid to late 90s, he's living in the Jungle with QD3. I don't know why QD3 wanted to live over there. QD3 is Quincy Jones' son. That's who did the Beef series, which, if anyone who's mad at Vlad and Adam 22 for promoting Beef, remember it was Quincy Jones' son that really formalized talking about actual violence in hip-hop and putting it on those DVDs. If you don't remember that, look it up, Beef by QD3. So Lloyd Avery II is living with QD3 in the Jungle, and he gets a J tattooed over his eyebrow, and QD3 talks about bumping into people that had Lloyd Avery's face leaning over the car with the shotgun tattooed on it in the Jungles, and he starts wearing red, and I don't think there's any record of anyone knowing, or there's been no interview of anyone saying who jumped him in or whatever, but he got Jungles tattooed over his eyebrow. I would imagine that must have meant he joined. I don't know, maybe if you just live in that neighborhood, you can get that. I don't know if that's a gang thing or not. I don't know. But he gets that over his eyebrow, but he starts exhibiting signs maybe of some mental illness, which goes back to my earlier point of, like, acting seems kind of weird to me. Not saying it's bad. It just seems that could be, if you can really jump around to playing drastically different people, you could be susceptible to that. It could be a sign of that. Obviously, someone like Denzel Washington seems like the opposite of crazy. He seems very stable. But to me, Denzel Washington or Robert De Niro, somebody, especially later in their career, they're really just movies. They're always themselves in a different role. They're not really totally changing their personality. But that's an aside. So anyways, Lloyd Avery starts exhibiting some signs of mental illness. He's doing movies, but he's arguing with friends. He's, and he grew up in this, he started acting, I think, before Boyz and Hood. So he was part of this scene of, like, wealthier kids who were having parties at mansions when no parents are home. That's a thing in LA of, like, kids can get really upper income kids or just industry kids or even middle class kids. There's a lot of drugs here and a lot of excess money and a lot of out of town people floating around, and the presence of Hollywood definitely does something to the spirit of the city. Can get kind of weird here, and maybe he got into drugs or something when he was young, so he gets caught on a movie set smoking sherm. He spazzes out on sets, threatens to kill, while with his newfound gang persona, he starts intimidating people on movie sets, certain people, threatening female hairdressers, stealing stuff. He gets cast in that Master P movie, Lockdown. If you remember that, it shows one of those movies that's on BET like twice every Saturday. he was such a problem on that set, he ends up getting kind of kicked off the movie. I guess he still is in the movie for some scenes. But he was so... This sounds like a... I don't have any... I mean, I don't, to my knowledge, haven't been around anyone on PCP. I certainly haven't seen them bug out, but this sounds like a classic PCP bug out on top of mental illness. So they're shooting this movie Lockdown at the State Penitentiary of New Mexico, which was an old prison that had been abandoned because it had been the site of a horrible riot. So now it was being used for film sets. And one day he spazzes out and she's yelling at this hairdresser, and the tattoo artist is there, this big guy hits him. And mind you, he's dressed in a prisoner's outfit because he's playing a prisoner. And like I said, this was the old State Penitentiary of New Mexico that, because there was a riot there with like 30 people killed, it was a worst prison riot ever. Or, well, maybe second to Attica. The new replacement prison is just like a half mile away. And Lloyd Avery gets punched. He's probably been smoking sherm, and he's dressed as an inmate. He runs away from the set, I guess, to get away from this guy who hit him, but he's also flipping out. And he gets to the new real prison with his prison inmate outfit on from the movie, and he starts climbing the wall into the real prison. And of course, the prison guards, train their rifles on him. They don't know, is he an inmate that escaped, is trying to get back in? And luckily, the head of security on the Master P Lockdown movie was like a Navy SEAL, and he comes and somehow talks the guards from shooting him. Really bizarre. I mean, that's such a strange sequence of events that he's dressed as a prison inmate, flips out, and tries to climb into a prison. Maybe it symbolizes that, the craziness in his mind. He knew he wanted to be away. Some prison can be very comforting to some people if you're in a very chaotic life. I mean, I didn't like jail or anything, but if you're grew up in a chaotic household and neighborhood, at times when you're in jail, it's like more relaxing and calmer than home. And I can see how, and I had far from the wildest household or anything like that. People have much worse than me. So I can see how some people want to be in jail because it's more relaxing. So anyways, so that incident happens. That kind of started to, his reputation on set is getting bad. And he goes back to LA. And there's a shopping plaza over in that same community of where Vista View and Rolling 60s, Baldwin Hills, all that kind of blends together. But it's in like this little forgotten little area. It's called Santa Barbara Plaza. It's old. I think it's been torn down now. It's probably part of the Wilshire line or the Crenshaw subway line redevelopment. This is cigars, not marijuana reefers. So this is this little forgotten shopping plaza called Santa Barbara Plaza. And there's another weird thing. LA housing is so expensive. A lot of people, not a lot, but more than a few people live in, I guess, a trendy way to term it would be a live workspace. But people live in commercial buildings. I've had 2 commercial buildings out here I was using for production, different stuff. Always ended up being different people. I knew, I fell asleep there, crashing there all the time. This city, it's as expensive or more expensive than New York, but it doesn't have very much public housing. It doesn't have much cheap housing. New York has, because of the tenement buildings, I mean, if it's got some nasty apartments, but they're affordable or, somewhat. LA, even the bad area, it's just very expensive. People end up living in commercial buildings. So he's living in this shopping plazas kind of thing. And there's just a bathroom in the hallway. Different people use it. He's maybe doing some robberies. He's stealing. It's 1999 in a neighborhood like that. If you're hustling, you keep a little crack sack for pocket money. So he's selling a little drugs, probably because something weird happens in the Santa Barbara Plaza. Well, it only makes sense if it was some little drug dispute. Two people a little older than him are sitting outside there, and he gets into some type of argument with them. It's said that it was a drug debt, so maybe they owed him, $100 or something for crack. He kills them both. Probably. He was never convicted of it, but he's the only suspect. And I guess there was witnesses. There was problems with the witnesses. They were like crackheads. One wanted to get paid by the prosecution and all that, but there was shell casings taken into evidence, and LAPD or the sheriffs or whoever investigated it did kind of a bad job with the evidence. So that happens, but he doesn't get taken into custody. And then something else happens there. There was an Islamic center in the Santa Barbara Plaza, Nation of Islam, actually. He gets into it with them. And not clear about the details of that, but he throws something through their window, and they go to attack him, and there's shots fired, and someone gets killed. I don't know, did he have people with him, like a gang, or I don't think it was a Nation of Islam member that got killed. Somebody supposedly gets killed or at least shot, and he has to get the hell out of that neighborhood. Nation of Islam was on him. So he's floating around still, and then he books another movie. Did he book? Oh, he books a movie called Shot, which is kind of weird. This white director kind of bases it on his own life. It's a low-budget movie about him going into a neighborhood in South LA to make a documentary, and then he gets mixed up with some gang members and, blah, blah, blah. So he books that movie and he shoots it, and then he gets taken into custody. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He did get convicted of the 2 murders. That's why he went to prison. I'm so stupid. I was thinking I'm jumping ahead to the next crazy thing that happens. So he goes on trial. There's shell casings associated with another drive-by and the Islamic Nation of Islam Center shooting, but he doesn't get charged with that. Case is a little shaky, but he doesn't have an alibi, and the witnesses are all crackheads, but they are witnesses. He gets convicted. He goes into prison, and he seemingly is almost happy he goes to prison, because the prison, he goes straight to Pelican Bay. I don't know, I guess because he had double life, and I guess he was a validated gang member or something, and then also he was still a little bit famous, so for whatever reason he went straight to Pelican Bay. So he becomes a devout, born-again Christian, and he's like really active in his Christianity, not like in a fake way, because he's not getting out. And the Reverend there talks about him being very devout and serious. And if you thought the story was weird up till now, you're about to hear the weird part. It's another middle-class black family in west part of South LA called the Robys, and they have a son, Kevin. Pretty sure that's his name. Kevin Roby gets into the occult in the 90s, maybe 89, 91, something like that. And he decides he's going to open a portal to another dimension and bring the evil power of Satan into himself, because he is the rightful ruler of the universe, not God. Kevin Roby is the supreme ruler of the universe, but he has to open a dark portal, so he RAPEs his own sister and red rums her as well, his own sister. So he's at Pelican Bay when Mr. Avery II gets there. Mr. Avery starts calling himself Baby Jesus, which, of course, you take on a name like that, this, again, sounds like a mental illness. And Mr. Roby calls himself the Satanic Christ. it's determined that it's a good idea by the prison staff to house these guys together. Now, who knows? Maybe Lloyd Avery II, as I said, he had all type of, he was attacking people on movie sets. He slapped one of his friend's mothers. Like, he would violently assault his own friends and maybe family members. You know, he would act out violently and aggressively. Perhaps he did something to a guard. There's no record. We don't know. So he's in there with Satanic Christ. And he misses a couple of counts. Now, you would think in a maximum security prison, all the inmates, if they don't count somebody, but they're locked in cells. They're supposed to stand by the door, but, you know, if they don't, what are the guards going to do? Run in everyone's cell? There's nowhere for them to go. He lays in his cell dead for 38 hours. Satanic Christ, according to him, while they are having a religious argument, he gets sick of Avery trying to convert him to Christianity. He unalives Mr. Avery, draws a pentagram with Avery's blood, and lays him in the pentagram. Pentagram is a 5-pointed star associated with devil worship. And Avery lays there for 38 hours until he's discovered. And the Satanic Christ confesses to it. Satanic Christ is around. I didn't really want to put these guys. I mean, he's just a crazy person. Hearing him talk. If you want to hear him talk, if you're interested in this, just Google Satanic Christ interview Spotify. It's somebody with the crime podcast interviewed him from prison. He talks in a very light, regular voice, but I mean, he's totally crazy. And he said that the murder of Mr. Avery was a warning to God. A warning to God that he was the ruler of the universe. That's what Mr. Roby said. So, far stranger than fiction, far more disturbing. If this was a horror movie, it would be too much. But unfortunately, it was real. Human beings can do some strange things. Not saying him being an actor made him do this. It's just in the seed of creativity often lies madness. And Lloyd Avery turned into a kind of a monster, and then he got put in the cell with the even worse monster as something monstrous happened. So that's Tales from the Hood horror movie from Gangland, L.A. Al Prophet, American Dope.